What made you realize your best friend was actually a complete jerk? Before we start with the first story, please hit a subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. I was poor and in college. I had the flu really bad one week and asked my friend, he lived in a dorm across the hall, to go to the convenience store in the dorm lobby and get me something to drink, and he could get whatever for himself too. He got me my soda and himself $40 worth of snacks. Didn't notice at the time, and I ordered us a pizza. He knew it was all I was going to have to eat for the next few days, and he snuck into my room and ate the leftovers while I was passed out on cold medicine. I didn't even really know how to respond, like I was already buying him snacks and feeding him. He had a meal plan on campus. I didn't. Why act like that? Story 2. Over time, we lost contact. Then she only reached out when she needed money. I let this go on too long until I found out I was pregnant with my first, and told her then I wouldn't send any money after that. She still asked. My daughter is now over 1.5, yo, and she had never even met her. I ended up blocking her and telling her not to bother trying to reach out anymore. Story 3. Best friends since elementary. In high school, when I told her I no longer wanted to be friends because she was mean to others all the time, including me, she said that I had to be friends with her because she was my friend in elementary and middle school, even though everyone told her not to be, and that everyone talked behind my back about how gross and weird I was, and she stayed my friend anyhow. She worded it like she was doing me a huge favor by being my friend, and that I somehow owed her for that charity. Story 4. When I trusted and believed he was like a brother only to have him steal thousands of dollars from me. The money didn't even matter, but the treason hurt for years. Happened to me too. A girl who was like a sister to me stole $80,000 from my business. Her husband did, with her knowledge, and then turned her back on me while I was going through chemo. To be fair, I did tell her the worst thing would be if I lost a huge amount of money like that, and that I'd rather have cancer again, so I did give her the method to hurt me the worst. So there's that. Story 5. Probably when my GF at the time admitted to sleeping with him and my 3 other guy friends while we were together. Not in an embarrassed way either. She was throwing it in my face to hurt me. I hoped against my own instincts that it wasn't true, but I asked him and knew instantly from the look in his eyes that it was. Basically lost my whole friend group overnight, but ended up finding much better friends in the long run. It all works out. Story 6. I'd gotten used to the cycle of him getting a new partner then disappearing until things went tits up and I'd help him pick up the pieces. We went through the cycle many times. Whatever he needed, I always had his back. Of course, when I was at my lowest ebb. Really having a really f***ing tough time, I let him know, and he said he'd try to find some time to hang out. The only thing I'd ever asked of him. Of course, he vanishes again, until his next relationship blew up. He called not long ago. I didn't bother getting back to him. Story 7. Lost my dad to suicide in 2016. After hospital bills and the like were paid, there was $15,000 and a car. 2006 Toyota Camry. My sister and I talked it over and decided I'd get the car and she'd get the cash. It was a big help as I've recently been diagnosed with several autoimmune disorders. I needed a reliable vehicle to drive to the various doctor appointments out of town. So, my friend came over one day and she had asked what was going on with my dad's estate. I told her the agreement my sister and I came to. She got quiet for several seconds and then with venom dripping she says, "Well, I wish my dad gave me a car. I've got kids to drive around." It took everything I had to bite my tongue and not say, "Well, maybe one day your dad will blow his brains out and you'll get a car." Story 8. If my guy best friend was interested in a girl or was talking to one, he would treat me like absolute garbage when he had no girls to talk to or was interested in. He would be super nice to me and hang out all the time a few years after we graduated high school. We were with a group of friends when he basically said, "I'm only nice to girls if there's a chance I can have sex with them or there's no other girls in the picture." It all clicked. Story 9. All we ever talked about was her, how she hated being single, who she dated, how jealous she was of other people with partners. She skipped my dad's funeral. She ignored my housewarming party. She'd ignore me for weeks at a time, then suddenly call me up crying because she got dumped. I drove her to surgeries and sat waiting to drive her home. Watched her kids. Sat through 100 weepy nights. Then she found a relationship. I have seen her 1 time in the past 9 months because I invited her to get together and haven't heard from her in 3. I guess she must be happy. Now, doesn't need me to be a shoulder to lean on. She wasn't ever interested in being a friend to me. I was just someone to cheer her up when she was feeling down. Story 10. Looking back on it, a red flag was when they insulted my mother's cooking. My family isn't very wealthy, but my mother does her best, and she had worked hard to make that meal so they wouldn't be hungry. And then they just insulted it. Also, they never said thank you. Unless it's got worms in it, you just don't say anything bad about a meal someone took the time and care to prepare for you as a guest. And it wasn't even as simple. I didn't like it very much. They straight up made fun of my mom and called her a terrible cook, which, by the way, she isn't. Story 11. I'd have to say, for me, it's been the reverse. It took time, but I've come to realize that I've been a complete asshole to every one of my good friends. My good friend was staying in a small trailer in the backyard of his parents' place. He invited me to come crash with him. I had a spot in the trailer. His folks were kind to me and let me shower and got me out a towel, and they fed me. I didn't do anything to contribute during my time there. In fact, I got peeved that my friend would listen to rock music while he slept. It legitimately pissed me off. I had no right to be pissed and should have been grateful to have a bed to sleep in at night. Not to mention everything else being provided for me without asking for anything in return. It's moments like these that serve as a reminder to me how selfish I once was. I've also been the kind of person who just likes to be contradictory, like sometimes to the point of being practically combative. I was with another good friend of mine, and for some reason, I decided I was going to go on some spiel about how meaningless words are, to the point that I decided I would illustrate by calling him bitch. And I tried to convince him that he shouldn't be upset as I continued to call him a bitch over and over and over again. I mean, incessantly not stopping. He was red in the face, but he said nothing to me except to not do that, which I ignored. I now realize I was an awful person for that. I was his friend, not his counselor or priest or whatever the fuck I thought I was. A friend should be able to seek comfort in friendship, and here I was trying to apply some holier-than-thou mindset that was really just abusive. I used to take pride in being difficult to work with, in being difficult to understand, in being an acquired taste of a human being, because that meant I wasn't some conformative, two-faced, flaky person like the ignorant masses. I said what I meant and I meant what I said. Unfortunately, everything that I meant was vapid and narrow and churlish. I'm still very much a person in need of improvement, in every facet of my life, but I certainly have no intention of repeating past mistakes, and I hope to be better to be around for anyone I would call a friend. Story 12. Oof, I have a couple. TBF, I wasn't hanging out with good people back in the day, and it took me a long time to accept I wasn't a good person back then. After a lot of self-reflection, I see my wrongs in theirs, but she constantly mocked my insecurities and appearance under the guise of teasing. However, it was definitely malicious at the extent she did it. I never once mocked her like that, always tried to hype her up. When my hair started thinning due to a medical condition, and she mocked me, that was the final straw. Another one was in a bad spot, and I helped them out with money as much as I could. One day she asked for a good chunk and I simply didn't have it. I was living off of beans and rice until my next paycheck. If I'd had it, she would have gotten it. She got so mad she told a bunch of very personal things to others and completely stopped talking to me. Later found out she was on meth at the time, and that might be why, and lastly was the one who turned a blind eye to her husband being physically and emotionally abusive to their children. Wouldn't leave him because she said that she couldn't handle the idea of being a single mom. Sometimes you have to put your kids' lives first and swallow your pride. Had to cut her out after that, and let the proper authorities know. Story 13. I was going through a really ugly breakup that left me in a very low point in my life. I was getting a lot of advice from my best friend on the whole situation. I told him that it would take time for me to get over her, as it was a relationship of over 2 years. 3 days after the breakup, I check Snap Maps and see that he is at my ex's apartment. It was 2 in the morning. He initially lied about it, but then admitted to hooking up with her. I started crying over the phone, and he literally said, "I just want you to know that I'm sorry this is hurting you, but I'm going to continue doing this with her. I lost my best friend of 22 years over that." It's crazy to me that one day, a friend who was a brother to me just snapped and ignored me in a really dark state of mind just so he could get laid. Edit. Thanks for the kind comments, everyone. This was 5 years ago, and I am doing great now. I have some great friends, and I'm with the woman of my dreams, as addressed in another comment. They ended up getting together, moved away, got married, then divorced after only 3 months. He lives by himself on the other side of the country now. Yeah, I've always assumed that they started talking while I was still with her. I'm aware that my ex was also at fault here. She was a piece of shit for getting with my best friend right after our breakup. I've just been cheated on before, so I guess it was easier for me to cope with that. But my best friend of 20 years doing that? That hurts more than any breakup I've ever had. Story 14. Friends I used to hang out with in high school. One of the group had been a good friend of mine since we were really young, even though we went to different schools. It was his house the others always hung out in, so I was kind of grandfathered into his new friends group from his school. I always felt a little unwelcome just cause of little things. They'd be playing video games, passing the controller, and I was always last, if I got a turn at all. If someone brought food or something to share, I would always get the least of it, FYI. I brought things to share more than anyone, so it wasn't like I was a big mooch or something. And they frequently made plans outside of my buddy's house to which I was never invited, but then they'd openly talk about it in front of me later. What really hit it home was one time I was hanging out there and found out they were all planning on going into the city for a concert or something. They straight up told me I wasn't invited, which I shrugged off because I didn't really have money for it anyway. But then their ride fell through and I offered to drive them. They treated that like it was absolute worst case scenario. And also like if they were to accept my offer, they'd be somehow doing me a favor. I said, okay, forget it. Message received. I left and never talked to them again. None of them ever tried to contact me again either. But it was really only childhood friend whom I was really disappointed in. I thought for sure he'd at least check in after that obviously devastating interaction. But that was many, many years ago. Thankfully, I have much better friends now. Story 15. My brother turned his back on our dad who paid his way through college, paid the down payment on his condo, and gave him 2 cars. When I asked him why, he said it was because he didn't text him enough. Our dad had had a stroke and could only use one hand. He texted my brother once every day or two with one hand anyway. I took care of our dad through surgery, radiation therapy, physical therapy, stroke rehab, and chemo. On the last weekend before our dad was starting chemo, I asked him if he wanted to come up and do some grilling with Dad because it was the last time we'd ever see him healthy. He said he had plans. I asked what the plans were. He wouldn't give me a straight answer. Our dad got so sick after that. Couldn't leave a wheelchair. My brother and sister came at Christmas and my dad made such an effort to spend time with my brother that he broke both hips. My brother said to me later he honestly thought it would be best if our crazy mother shot our dad and herself. I think my brother is a lunatic. There's no anger or hate. I just can't think of him as a sane person anymore. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.